Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and here's something I've wanted to talk about for a while. And this is something that I'm sure a lot of YouTubers out there have addressed as far as content for their wrestling videos is concerned. I'm here to talk about the pay-per-view experience. I've been a fan going on 31 years this July, and watching pay-per-views was always a big deal for me. And I feel fortunate, that my family was able to afford them, every month. I mean, granted, if you're watching it in your house and that's only 2 hours, they only charge you $14.95 plus tax. After taxes, it's a little more. That's why I said plus tax. But regular 3 hour show was like 29.95, $30, and then bumped up to $45 in later years. But there were times when when I was living my own in my early 20s, I didn't buy pay-per-views as much, so I had to resort to live streaming, and various friends were able to tell me what the best links were to use, and so they'd text me one link, and then that would crash. They'd text me another, and we get together and sometimes watch it just around our computers. I mean, come on, you'd have thought we were complete dumbasses, but no, we were actually just trying to watch these shows, without having to go completely broke in trying to do so. So anyways, yeah, the pay-per-view experience. Yes, so they were always on a Sunday. So I started watching in the summer of '95. By that point, WWF had moved all of their pay-per-views to Sunday nights. You had SummerSlam on a Monday, Survivor Series on a Wednesday, Thanksgiving Eve, sometimes a Royal Rumble on a Saturday, and Mania was always on Sunday, but in the afternoon. But I like it in the evening, anytime after 7. Perfect. So, I just remember growing up, the Attitude Era bleeding into the Ruthless Aggression Era. You get your average pay-per-view, and I'm not talking about WrestleMania or SummerSlam or any of the big four. Your average 3 hour card, you watch the build-up to the main matches going into it, and you felt like you were watching the same thing sometimes over and over again, but really it was building to something. I'd say to myself, I trust this is leading somewhere. And in fact, it did. It was leading to a culmination of a feud that's been building up for so many months, for instance. And I just remember a couple of weeks, 4 weeks out, they'd probably book pay-per-views, book these shows. And so that gives the wrestlers who are feuding, enough time to develop a storyline and develop a rivalry and play it out on television week to week. That's why we have these weekly shows, by the way. So it had that feel of, okay, this is really leading to something. And, the writers paced themselves and took their time for the most part. And they did stuff that actually made sense, not stuff that was counterproductive to the product or to the storyline itself, to the angle. So I'm trying to think, it would get to the point, okay, we're 2 weeks away from the show. You get excited. I'm like, okay, not this Sunday, but the next. And then finally, okay, it's this Sunday. So I remember watching in middle school, watching Raw, being allowed to stay up past 10. I mean, I don't know if many kids that age can say that they do that, but I certainly did. I don't care. But anyways, yeah, I just remember like they're in the Attitude Era, there'd be brawls to finish off Raw, and Raw was only 2 hours, which is all it needed to be. Forget this 3 hour bullshit. And these brawls because sometimes the feuds would intertwine and they'd all come together in the end, some way, somehow, while they'd be separate matches on the pay-per-view. What's gonna happen when they battle it out this Sunday? Copyright 1999. Okay, I can't wait. All right, I'm so excited. See, now everything just falls flat. Either I'm too old, and also the product sucks. So I was gonna say but now I say and it sucks. But either I'm too old or maybe just the mystique is lost because I know how the business works, being a longtime fan. I just don't feel that way with PLEs. And I'm okay if they switched over. It's actually a lot cheaper. I was very happy when the WWE Network came in 2014, launched in 2014, and $9.99. You really can't beat that deal. Can't say the same now. And the only reason they changed it is because financially it was expensive to run, and they felt like some content, not all the content was getting all the viewership that it deserved, and that's why they cut several programs and moved a lot to Peacock, and then moved the pay-per-views now to Netflix. It's a mess, this ESPN bullshit. It's TKO's fault. But anyways, yeah, so I just remember, yeah, even then, those were still on Sundays, and, it was just the cheap, save money on the cable bill, basically, not having to buy a pay-per-view for $45 a month, and 55 if you're talking WrestleMania. Then HD, it always upped it to like $10 more, so maybe more than that. 65 for Mania. Holy shit, I probably spent that. Anyways, the funny thing, it just had this organic feel to it, and technology too is another thing. I'm thinking about, sorry if I feel like I'm stammering here, I'm just thinking about these things as I'm talking about them, because I'm ad-libbing here, because there's a lot of details that, come to me as I'm just talking about this, and I'm reliving what it was like as a childhood being a wrestling fan as a child. And we didn't have a lot of technology to speak of. We had our TVs and computers, but it's not like it wasn't as ubiquitous. You weren't on your device, so you couldn't watch it on your iPhone, you couldn't watch it on your iPad or whatever. We didn't have that at the time, and y'all know that. So it was exciting to race home to, can I get to see the first match in time? I gotta be home for Raw tonight, I gotta be home for SmackDown. People don't have that rush now with television. It's probably a good thing, but by the same token, it takes away the aura mystique, because I can get it at any time, so long as I have the money to pay for it. And there's just something about that that doesn't scream nostalgia to me, for lack of a better term. But anyways, pay-per-view cards today, or PLEs rather, do not have the same feel as they once had. Now, under the direction of TKO, today's PLE cards are limited to 4 to 5 matches per card. And that's a real buzzkill. It's been like that since October of 2023, when TKO's ownership went into effect. That was it for the McMahons. Growing up as a lifelong fan, I'd say most pay-per-views had 7 to 8 matches, give or take. And it wasn't always 7 matches or 8 matches, sometimes 9 or 10, and it didn't have to be a SummerSlam or a WrestleMania. And also, there was that +1. If you include a kickoff, pre-show, Sunday Night Heat match, free-for-all match, whatever era we're talking about, and that would warm up the crowd before the pay-per-view commenced. And that match was usually 5-10 minutes, no longer than that. And some of those matches actually did a good job of getting over certain talent, and that was the time to do it. So you always got to have that opening, that warm-up act, so to speak. And you go to a rock concert, and there's always somebody going to open up for Led Zeppelin, or for Journey, or for Styx, or whatever. But, WWE, on Raw, you go to Raw or SmackDown taping, these developmental guys, these jobbers, whatever you want to call them, amateurs, will be sort of the opening act, and they're dark matches. And of course, if you watched Raw back in like 2000, 2001, you'd have to sit through Metal and Jack, the taping of that at the arena. So it wouldn't be till Saturday night on WLNY New York 55 at 11 p.m. that you'd get to watch your show that you were present for. And then of course Raw. Sorry. All right, so yeah, that was always an aesthetic that I really liked. It's important to have a certain amount of matches. And the reason being is, the talent works so hard, and this is a big payday for them. It's not as big a payday as what WrestleMania would be, but it's a big enough payday that, they could say, hey, I really worked hard for this, and I finally got the featured spot, and, this is a big deal, and it's a stepping stone to launch my career even further into superstardom. So, they can take that away, just a pat on the back and, satisfaction, what have you. So 4 or 5 matches today, it feels like I'm watching something very minuscule. It feels like In Your House, and there's nothing bad about In Your House. I watch a bunch of those, every now and again from the mid-90s. And then there were 2 hours, only $15 for the pay-per-view, and 5 matches was enough for that. And they're a great length. But it seems like today they're just drawn out on purpose, like we have to go the 30-minute mark. It's not like organically, it's going to happen for 30 minutes. I feel like there's a little bit too much planning, and sometimes you have to let actions take their course. And sometimes I don't think they do that anymore. And also, another thing too, while this is on my mind, they don't do a good job with the psychology of matches so much anymore. And that's what turns me off of today's WWE product. Don't just go for a high-flying spot just for the hell of it. Use some psychology. Use some common in-ring sense. There's a reason you're going for that spot, and don't just do it for the sake of entertaining the crowd. Yes, we love to watch high spots, but there's a rhyme or reason behind it, and use it when the situation calls for it. It's not like Mick Foley. Here's a great example, a little contrasting, but Mick Foley, as a hardcore legend, he wouldn't be having these brutal, bloodbath matches. Maybe in Japan, he was probably having them every night, but in WWE, certainly, growing up, I didn't watch, Hell in a Cell every night getting thrown off cages or whatever, because it's saved for special occasions, and it's saved for moments when it counts, when it actually really matters. And so that's the problem now with today's wrestling. That's just an example. Too much, the high flying, nothing wrong with it, but I just feel it's overdone so much that it kills the effect, the aura and the allure that it once had. Watching a match with a guy who's under 200 pounds was unheard of in the 90s. maybe not as bad in the 2000s and the 2010s. Now it's commonplace. They're not on steroids anymore, so a lot of guys are smaller. So, wrestlers probably don't strike people the same way as they once did too, with physical appearance. So, they kind of look more normal every day. And that's not a bad thing, but it also doesn't make them stand out. And it's just different from what it was like for me growing up as a fan. Here's another thing that bothers me. Filler advertisements. It's so overkill now, and this was a chief complaint for WrestleMania 42, both nights. As great as the main event matches were, take nothing away from it, the women's matches were hampered, as I talked about in a previous video, which upset me a lot. And other matches of undercard guys, like that ladder match, the six-pack ladder match for the Intercontinental title, Penta successfully retaining, it should have felt more organic. It should have felt like something more special. And granted, I haven't been following it week to week. I got other shit going on, but, that match right there should have felt like something everybody was clamoring to see. If this were Money in the Bank and WrestleMania 21, everybody would want to see, who's going to win it. And then, because it was a brand new concept, and Edge won it, and that propelled his career to the next level. And so these ladder matches need to do the same. It doesn't matter if it's Money in the Bank, Intercontinental title, U.S. title, whatever. Ladder matches need to be given attention, as Razor and Shawn set the bar for back at WrestleMania 10. Yeah, but they did kind of start, the advertisements have always been a problem. I want to say like the mid to late 2010s. There were commercials for certain campaigns that started to eat up time on PLEs. I like the Be a Star campaign, although, they could have done without mistreating JR on public TV in late 2011 on Raw every week. But that started to eat up a lot of time, and especially at WrestleManias when you could have added another match, give someone their big payday. There's other angles and storylines which could be furthered instead of just cramming all those guys into a battle royal. Just little things like that. They really matter, and I can't begin to stress that enough. So I'm sorry, but this is how I feel. What else? Yeah, so the campaigns, and then there was a couple other ones which I can't recall at the moment, but, it felt like they dragged too long. And then you have these movie premieres, like when Austin was in The Condemned. That ate up a lot of time, I thought, WrestleMania 23. There's nothing wrong with Stone Cold being, a star of a big breakout movie or whatever, but, we really need to keep things moving. This kind of goes back to the late 80s, early 90s, when the early WrestleManias, there were 3 in a row, 5, 6, and 7 that all had 14 matches on one card. Now, they were not all bangers, let's be honest here. Maybe the main events, but that's about it. These were mostly throwaway matches, maybe to ensure that everyone had a chance to compete on the cards those nights. And, Dino Bravo versus Ronnie Garvin, the Mountie versus Tito Santana, Hacksaw Jim Duggan versus Dino Bravo. Matches you've probably seen on Wrestling Challenge or Superstars in that era, but they happened because Vince McMahon made it so that these matches would happen in enough time to be allowed. They had 4 hours to work with. And then, after a few years, when Mania got cut down to 3, they had to cut down the amount of time in matches. And WrestleMania 12 really suffered. They could have benefited from 4 hours because of the Iron Man match, and I already did a whole rewrite on that, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this. But they really could have gotten a couple extra matches, and 3 hours only left time for 6, including the main event that night. Great match, so nothing bad to take away from it. So, yeah, that's a bit of an exaggeration, because then you think of WrestleMania 35 in 2019. That was an 8-hour WrestleMania, and I'm not saying we need to do that. By no means, by no stretch of the imagination, should we be sitting through an 8-hour WrestleMania. It was 2 hours of kickoff, so you had 2 matches in the first hour and 2 in the second, including the Andre the Giant Memorial Battle Royal, which hasn't done anything for anybody. Come on now. Then the main card had 12 matches, so 16 matches, but they were all like main event, top tier, semi-main event level matches, upper mid-card matches, so they're very lengthy. Miz and Shane McMahon, Triple H and Batista, what else? Kofi Kingston, Daniel Bryan, Kofi Mania, yeah, that was all great stuff. And the women's main event, Ronda Rousey, Becky Lynch, and Charlotte Flair. Oh, great stuff. But by 1 in the morning in the women's main event, it was the first time the women main evented WrestleMania, so that was a very big deal, and rightfully so. But by the time 1 in the morning hit and the main event happened, everyone was ready to go. They were exhausted. And that's what led to the decision for 2-night WrestleManias, which I'm not against. But I think they could do more with it and structure it better. But we're talking about pay-per-view cards in general. Another thing too, and this is outside of WrestleMania, extra long video packages. That should only be used in very rare cases. It can eat up an exorbitant amount of time otherwise. The best example is The Rock versus John Cena and their feud leading up to WrestleMania 28, which I was there for, but I wasn't there the following year, Mania 29. I'm glad I was there for once in a lifetime, not twice in a lifetime. Should have really only done this match once, but oh well. So, they had a year long to build that feud. It was the night after WrestleMania 27. They agreed to face each other one-on-one in the main event at WrestleMania. Okay, and I'm like, okay, my friend and I, we said to ourselves, okay, we're totally going. We're there, dude. So, we ended up being there. What a great night that was. And they had all these weeks and months and days and nights to build up to everything to make it believable, and they did. And The Rock couldn't be there every week because of his travel schedule, and Cena was world champion here and there and defending it on occasion. But the media, the social media really played a big part in late 2011. They started giving out wrestlers Twitter accounts, Facebook pages, what have you. I don't think Instagram was around yet, but it came a little bit later on. But social media was running rampant. They had Tout, for crying out loud. Anybody remember that? Whatever the next tweet's going to be. But yeah, so I think Rock and Cena really benefited from that because Rock couldn't always be present every week, and the via satellite, that added fuel to the fire. So that's an example of a long-ass rivalry. It's very rare in this day and age you see something like that. That was more commonplace in the 80s and 90s, but 2000s have been sort of gone because, weekly TV and it's different too with the schedule. They don't tape as many shows back to back like they did in the 80s, like 4 episodes of Superstars back to back, 4 episodes of Wrestling Challenge back to back. You have Raw and the B show on one night, and then SmackDown and its B show. It could be Superstars, and Superstars was shared by both brands. So that, that made the travel a lot easier on the wrestlers and, the painkillers and the steroids. But nevertheless, there was a big difference in the structure of how these shows were filmed and such. But yeah, don't overexhaust the audience too. In the 8-hour WrestleMania 35, never again. Never before, never again. So the best thing I could think of as far as some of the best, I'm not going to give you any examples because there's so many out there, but the best type of pay-per-views where you have 8 matches on the card, what I would do to make it even better, add in a few championship matches. You're going to have your world title, your mid-card title, Intercontinental or United States, women's title, tag team title, 3 to 5 max. And at the time of the Attitude Era, we had 7 championships. The WWE title, Intercontinental title, European title, Hardcore title, Light Heavyweight title, tag team title, women's title. 7 championships to contend for, which isn't a lot compared to a year later in like 2001 when the Invasion angle was happening. There were 14 belts to be contended for, and that was just overkill because you had the WCW World title, US title, WCW Tag titles, and the Cruiserweight title. And so they unified a lot of those belts and combined them with their WWF counterparts. And except the US title, that's still, that got resurrected not long after its closure. Its abandonment. But yeah, having a few championship matches make it exciting too. And more often than not, growing up, the Intercontinental title always kicked off a pay-per-view. And it was always like Jericho versus Angle, Jericho versus Benoit, Guerrero versus Benoit. I don't think they ever battled for the IC title on pay-per-view, but they've had a number of great matches together. Bret Hart, Mr. Perfect, that's going back SummerSlam 91, great IC title match. Matches like that. And it's like, give them 15, 20 minutes and you're going to hook the fans in right away. See, I know what I'm saying here when it comes to how to kick off these shows and, have that match that's just going to hook in your audience, and that's the match. Those are the type of matches to go and see. All right, preferably 8-match pay-per-views work in the context of single-branded, like the mid-2000s, and they tried that again in the mid-2010s, but that did not last long. A Raw brand pay-per-view, SmackDown brand pay-per-view. ECW, forget December to Dismember. We're not even going to go there. Like, I remember between the years 03 to 07, so like Raw would have New Year's Revolution, Backlash, Vengeance, Unforgiven, Taboo Tuesday, it's 1 calendar year, while SmackDown had No Way Out, Judgment Day, The Great American Bash, No Mercy, and Armageddon. And then they shared the big 4. So let's see, it's 10, So 14 pay-per-views, but you're sharing it amongst two brands within a single banner company. So that's perfect planning and placement right there. Storyline-wise, things could have been better at those times. There were certain ones that just dragged down, especially when JBL was the champ on SmackDown. I wasn't looking forward to, like, Armageddon '04. That actually wasn't a bad match, but you knew he was going to win until Mania. He was going to drop the belt. So single-branded ones, and then the championship thing I was saying, 3 to 5 championship matches max, single-branded. Also include some non-canon matches in order to put over a new star and or to give talent a chance to compete on a pay-per-view card. You could have a minuscule match like Mordecai versus Scotty 2 Hotty, Judgment Day '04. Very lower card match. Mordecai made his debut that night, so Scotty put over Kevin Fertig, who would later become Kevin Thorne. Fertig is Mordecai's real name. Another good example, let's see, and it doesn't have to be a great match, so let's not kid ourselves. You know, it could be, let me think of something kind of rare. Well, this match should have happened, but didn't because of a premeditated assault. Maven versus Matt Hardy was supposed to happen at Armageddon '03. Batista, angry at his loss over Shawn Michaels, attacked Maven when he entered the ring, and Matt Hardy did a fake match with the referee counting 3 and giving it to him. But a match like that, of that caliber, certainly can be advertised, or can even be a bonus match, but have something like that too. You know, that'd be like putting Kit Wilson in a match with I don't know, Javon Evans or something like that. These are guys I think of that you don't see a whole lot of, and you'd like to see more of, quite frankly, because we've got great talent. They're just not being used right. And WWE, this isn't the first time they've done that. I could say the same for 2006. But I think it's gotten worse here with TKO, because you have a lot of people who just don't know the psychology of wrestling, and Triple H doesn't really have a whole lot to say because he's not the top dog anymore, and neither are any of the McMahons. So they're working under different leadership here, so it makes it difficult to enjoy as a fan the product. So yeah, there's just the pay-per-view was an experience, and then you get ready to watch it. I know I've been kind of going back and forth between different topics within the realm of pay-per-views, but the experience, I just want to circle back to that one last time before we close out here. You know, you get excited to watch it. My brother and I, you know, we'd have Sunday Night Heat ready to go, or the free-for-all, depending on what time period, and then they'd have the one match, and then Sunday Night Heat was always fun, especially when, you know, in the WWF New York era, 2000 to 2002. So Michael Cole and Taz, or sometimes Al Snow would fill in for Taz. They'd be up in the bleachers of whatever arena they were in. My brother and I saw them King of the Ring '01 at the Continental Airlines Arena in... Sorry, I'm blanking on the city. I'm sorry. East Rutherford, New Jersey. Yep, that was in East Rutherford that year. So we saw Michael Cole and Taz conducting, you know, live interviews, but we actually couldn't hear them because it's like not like they were using the big house mics. They were just using the ones just for the TV mics, so only the TV audience could hear them, those watching on TV that night. So they were up here and we were down here. We weren't that close. We weren't on the floor. And then, you know, they'd be talking about it, then the match would come, and then JR and the King or Paul Heyman would, you know, call the action instead of the usual Sunday Night Heat announcers. And then we get right to the show. I remember we'd switch it over. Channel 64. 64 was pay-per-view 1. Then we'd wait for the warning. We didn't know if the pay-per-view was going to work, because sometimes it didn't always work. We saw warning. Unauthorized copy of this is very illegal. Yes, the warning sign came up. Okay, it works. And then the signature, and then we'd be off to the races. Yeah, it's just a unique feel watching a pay-per-view versus watching a show, and it doesn't feel as rushed. It's like they take their time because they only have a certain amount of matches to work with, and, you know, I feel like a lot more better planning goes into a pay-per-view versus your average weekly TV show. So that's all I've got for today, and, you know, if you have anything you want to add, please do, and hopefully keep this discussion going. It's been another great edition of Harry Fling Wrestling. I am your host, Harry Fling, and until next time, everybody, bye-bye.